Welcome to the Thriving Children podcast, the show that helps parents and teachers to put the magic back in child development. Here's your host, Clare Crew.
This is episode 127 of the Thriving Children podcast, and I'm Clare Crew. In this episode, I welcome back child development guru Gill Connell, this time around to talk about language development. Hello again, Gill.
Hi, Claire. Lovely to be here again.
So we're talking a lot about language today, and it really is central for learning. But it's about more than just knowing your sight words and your letters once you get to school age, isn't it?
Absolutely. Sight words are probably at the end of the in terms of importance. It's what happens in the early years and how children acquire language that is the most critical. And I guess the first thing I want to say is language or acquisition of language and vocabulary is acquired through human conversation. In other words, a screen is not going to do it. Kids need the messaging through facial features, through context, through having interaction with you, reading your body language, and that helps them develop an understanding of the nuances of language. One of the things I talk about is language plus experience equals understanding. In other words, you can have isolated words and they don't, but you're not having an experience that helps you gain context. But you could also have experience with no language, and you don't gain the understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also emphasises why that whole body hands-on kind of style of learning, especially in the years before school, but also once children are at school, is valuable, because if they don't understand, to understand a word, it needs to not just be this abstract concept. They need to actually be involved in an experience. Like I think an example you used in the book is butterflies. To actually have an experience with butterflies is so much more different than just learning what the word butterfly looks like.
Well, when you have a physical interaction with a butterfly, you have a visual, auditory, kinesthetic experience. You see it, you hear it, you smell it, you taste it. Kids can touch a butterfly, they can observe it, they can feel it as it creeps on their hands. They might even put it in their mouth. Kids do stuff like that. But what they're learning through that whole body experience is what a butterfly really is, and that helps them to transfer to the next stage, which is being able to record what a butterfly looks like in a symbolic form. And when you look at the brain science behind that, we know that young children are busy filling their right brain with knowledge and experience. They enter the world with a blank, as a blank slate, basically. And they are spending their early years filling the right brain with information. For instance, if I said to you, these three letters, C-A-T, what pops into your head?
A cat.
A cat, right. So you went into your right brain and you knew that those three letters in that order represent something fluffy with whiskers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I said HTP, which are three letters in a specific order, but technically aren't a word, where does your brain go?
I'm just seeing big letters, HTP.
So does your brain tell you those three letters possibly mean something? Because what most people will say to me, those are the letters of the internet. And so you didn't do that. You are not the norm, Claire. But anyway, that what I'm trying to teach people here is that what you did, if you don't know what HTP is you go into your right brain and you say to yourself, where have I seen that before? And your right brain has recorded HTP because you see it on your screen. Often it's actually HTTP.
I know, that's where I got stumped.
Yeah. But what happens is, I'm sure you were saying things to yourself like, where have I seen that before? And the point I'm making is, as adults, we have accumulated so much information about our world in our right brain that we can actually technically go straight to the left side, which is the analytical side, which is the side of your cortex that allows you to understand and interpret symbols and what they represent. But little people are still busy accumulating that information. I guess that's really what I'm trying to say. So when we talk about learning, it has to be whole body experience. And I guess the other thing that I want to make clear here is that depending on your experience, that will affect your understanding. Now, I was on a bus with some little 4-year-olds, and we were heading out to a wildlife park, and we weren't quite ready to go, and the children were getting a little restless, as you can imagine. So I said to the kids, how about everybody kneeling on their seat and seeing if you can count how many kids are on the bus? And it was quite chaotic, but what was really interesting was, out of the corner of my eye, one little boy was making his way down the stairs of the bus. And I said to him, Daniel, where are you going? And he looked at me and he stood on his tippy toes and he pointed to the ceiling and he said, I'm going outside to see how many children are on the bus. Now, he had a totally different experience of that word on. And that determined the interpretation. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. He needed to see it from the outside.
Absolutely. And that was because that was how he had learned about on. Now, why I'm talking specifically at this point about on is because language in particular, directional language, so over, under, in front, behind, between, up, down, left, right, inside, outside, top, bottom, all of those kinds of words are actually critical for kids to understand when it comes to a more formal classroom. And even, in a preschool, when they're painting, I'm sure you or the teacher will say, now let's pop your name at the top of the page. Where is top? And my example of that is, try touching you listeners, if you try this, touch the top of your head. Now touch the top of your toe. How can top be up here on your head and also on the top of your toe? It is totally about your experience. What have you experienced about top? Because that gives you your understanding. And, those words are critical because for instance, if your child's name started with P and they said, how do I draw a P? You would say things like, it starts at the top and then you go down and then you go up and then you go around. Highly abstract words that mean nothing to children if they haven't got context based around that. I'm sure that teachers get frustrated sometimes when, you say to a child, now stand beside somebody, or can you stand next to, and, the understanding is all over the place sometimes.
Yes.
Now, how kids learn this stuff is by having real experiences with their body. So in a playground environment, you can say to children while they're doing some activity, you're walking on top of the box. You're crawling on top of the plank, or whatever. In other words, I notice you are, you say things like, I notice you are, and you tell them about their position, or you're moving through, or you're going around. But the point is, you're giving kids a language plus experience moment, and they are learning to interpret those words in that context. And believe me, these words have totally different meanings in different contexts. So that's just one example. And then there's examples of body. How do I learn my body map? How do I learn about what I look like? And in turn, my body image helps me to manipulate and maneuver myself around and through and between. if I don't have a good body picture, then I'm quite often a clumsy kind of a person. So we can help kids with, when they're doing activities that you're rolling a ball and you use the language that the children are doing. I wonder if you could stop the ball with your elbow. I wonder if you could stop it with your wrist. And so what you're doing by using specific language is you're helping children form that picture in their head of what they look like, and you're naming body parts, and you're giving them the opportunity to form their own picture in their head. I can't stress enough that language plus experience equals understanding.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming that they need these same kind of experiences or these same words to be heard again and again and again before it is something that they can really own.
That's right. Repetition is key. But as an adult, we have to be very mindful that we've got a whole lot more experience tucked away in our right hemisphere. So we assume kids do too, but they don't. We have to be very aware to make every opportunity that children move a learning experience, and that involves language. So in that regard, I'm always talking to educators and parents about how we respond to kids when they're in a play kind of an environment, and that is that we're using experiences or things that children are doing in a play kind of environment to help grow children's vocabulary. You could say things like, instead of, I noticed you're climbing up the ladder, you could think of another word that you could use for up. Maybe try, hey, Johnny, I see you're ascending the ladder. So he knows he's climbing up, but here's another word that means up. And so we're going to, and this is the next point I want to make, is that we need to make language nutritious. We need to not be afraid to use bold words. I'll never forget, one of my kids rushed in to tell me something when she'd been out on the playground, and she said, she told me the story, and then she said, "Oh, Mum, that was just rhinoceros." And I'm thinking, what on earth is she saying? And then it dawned on me, she'd done very, very well. It was, the word what she was wanting to use was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And she had the initial sound right, and then she had the ending sound right, and she had the number of syllables right. She just used the word in the wrong context. And of course I didn't correct her. And that's another thing we should talk about, is we should never tell a child they're wrong in this context. We should just model correctly. So I said, "Oh, yes, it was ridiculous, wasn't it?" And so, she's learning, she's here, she's attempting to use that wonderful, rich, nutritious language, but she's hearing me use it in the correct context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. Some great points there. So you've already shared some great practical examples, Gill, but do you have any other ways of how, when we're interacting with children as they move, as we dress them, as we see them at play, that we can make our words count, that we can add in that nutrition in regards to language?
Well, lots of teachers ask me about left and right, and mums and dads, how do we help kids to learn left and right? And it's complex, because left and right is challenging if you haven't got your midline developed, and that's another podcast talking about midline. But what is really helpful is, and I found this as a teacher and as a mum, that I consciously decide, I divide my months of the year up into left and right months. So January's left, February's right, etc. I go through the year. And why I do that is, if I'm dressing one of my grandchildren, if it's a left month, I will say, let's put your left hand through the left sleeve, and we'll always do left first. We'll try kicking the ball with our left hand. Sometimes I'll give them stickers, and if it's a left month, they'll have their sticker on their left hand and on their left foot. the reason I do that is so that they can see and learn that the whole of their left side is, the whole of that side that they've got a sticker on is the left side. We'll go on left walks. So if we're walking to the park, we'll always go left. And I'll talk about left while we're doing that kind of stuff. I know that sounds kind of pedantic, but where I'm coming from here is you need to be consistent with left and right, otherwise it's confusing. And you need to have the body be the guideline. You know, the body, if I know where my left side of my body is, and when you're washing me in the bath, you're washing my left side of my body before you're washing my right side, then I learn what left is, and if that's left, the other side must be right. I use that technique in my teaching, in my everyday life. I find that 99.9% kids get it, right? Regardless of whether they've got a midline or not. So it's just, you know, the body is the great teacher, and in the early years the body teaches the brain, not the other way around. So we have to be very mindful that to make every experience a learning experience, and it's that you doing lots of talking. And in that regard, if I can just branch off to something else that is
absolutely
kind of interesting. Quite often kids are shy to talk, and they, you know, we say to kids things like use your words, and I hate that really because
me too.
If children are not, you know, if they're shy or they feel embarrassed about talking, or they don't have the vocabulary and they feel like they're being judged, they just shut up shop. They don't talk. And that doesn't mean they're not communicating, because they're listening and they're understanding, but they just feel for some reason, you know, and that they often, not always, but that they just don't have the words, or they don't want to participate. One of the magic techniques I have found works incredibly well is if you take them out of their own body. Now, I know that sounds strange, but I have a little grandson who's, this has worked a treat, and he has some speech language issues. So what we did one day, and it was just out of the blue, I said to him when he came to granny school, I said, Jakey, today I thought we might be robots. So we're going to walk like a robot, and we're going to talk like a robot. And I said to him, Jakey, what would you like in your sandwich today? And he looked at me as if I was off the wall. And then he said, I'll have egg, please, Granny. I nearly fell over. That was, his parents couldn't believe it. And that night he was talking robot at the dinner table. He was talking robot. He's 7 now. Could we talk robot, please, Granny? But you know, what I'm saying here is, it won't work for every child, but be creative. What happened at that moment was I took him out of who he was and put him into another role, or another, you know, he went from being Jacob to being a robot. And he lost all of his inhibitions, and away he went. It was incredible. So, you know, if your kid loves fairies, or your child loves cows, talk like a cow at the dinner table. You know, and that means we have to talk like a cow. I was with one of my grandchildren she's 9, and we were talking about this, and I said to Caitlin, what would you like to talk like today? She said, I'm going to talk like a toaster. I thought, how do you talk like a toaster? Well, she got down, crouched down, she put her arms out. I'm doing it while I'm talking to you. She put her arms out wide, crouched down, and she told me a big story, and then halfway through it she went and jumped up. Oh, how creative was that? It was just beautiful. I just wished I'd been able to record it. So, you know, part of this is we need to be crazy. We need to allow kids to see that we're crazy. You could talk in a long voice, or a high voice, or whatever. I mean, explore. your own voice and let your creativity engage children, because when you do that, they lose their inhibitions. They want to join in. They want to explore their own language capabilities, or just exploring their own voice is incredibly important as a tool to become confident to speak and to communicate. So, yeah, it's lots of fun.
That's brilliant to hear. I think there's going to be lots of robots at the dinner table tonight.
Yeah, I'd say
or
so.
toasters, or and a big part of that is giving children the ownership of what they want to talk in the voice of, particularly if they've got that bit more confidence and they want to have that say themselves. But also, as you said, just fun. It's all about having that meaningful, engaging relationship with children, and really that language development isn't going to come very easily without it.
It's the interaction. I keep coming back to that. It's that, it's human to human. And that is the essential ingredient. And as the play partner for a child, you need to take your adult serious hat off and play and have fun and just get in the moment with kids. Let me tell you another story before we go. My little grandson, Jakey, doesn't like spiders much. And we were in the garden, just, doing stuff, hanging out. And there was a spider, of course. And he was about 3 at the time. And when he saw the spider, he went behind my legs, and that was where he stayed. So I thought, we have to change this. And this was a small spider, not one of the ones you have in your country, your part of the world. So I said to him, I started talking to the spider. I said, "Oh, hello. Hello, spider. Oh, I wonder where you're going. I wonder if you're going to your granny's house. Maybe you're going to your granny's house to have lunch. Oh, look, I see you're still wearing your pajamas. Do you think you'll get changed out of your pajamas when you get to Granny's house? What will your granny make you for breakfast? I bet she'll make you porridge." And I started having this conversation with the spider. And it was a great, some people would consider I was, losing the plot here. But what happened was that made Jacob curious. And before I knew it, he's coming out from behind my feet and he's checking out the spider that Granny's telling me he's wearing pajamas. and, I don't know whether I cured him of his fear of spiders, but the language that went on was the trigger for him becoming curious and losing his inhibition. It's such a powerful tool. We really need to embrace it and make it nutritious, make it fun, make it crazy. Doesn't have to be an outcome attached to it. In other words, having your kids recite the ABCs is not really where we're going here. What we're doing is exploring the beautiful world of language.
Oh, that's a lovely point to wrap up on, I think, Gill. And a reminder where we can find you online.
Yeah, we're on Facebook on movingsmart.co.nz. We're on Facebook, Moving Smart, and we're also on Twitter. We have a website, movingsmart.co.nz. You just Google Moving Smart, you'll find us. We've got lots of blogs, lots of information, and don't forget there's 2 books, one called A Moving Child is a Learning Child and Move, Play and Learn with Smart Steps, which have all of this information and 900 activities to go play with your kid.
Yeah, I'll put a link to all of that in the show notes. And also, if this is the first time you've heard us both speaking in conversation, I definitely recommend that you tune into episodes 119 and 120, which were also conversations between Gill and myself around the connection between movement and child development. So thank you again for being here, Gill. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. I always learn something or am reminded of something, and I just love your passion for what you do and for early childhood.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, that's why I get up in the morning. I love it.
So that's the end of this episode of the Thriving Children podcast. Until next time, be kind to yourself.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving Children podcast. For even more goodness, visit thrivingchildren.com.au.